There have been a lot of comments about the new version of The Little Mermaid. Most of it is just pure racism, but I want to look at it at a deeper level. So first of all, I want to say I think the casting's great. I think Bailey has a great singing voice. She looks great in the trailer. I think it's awesome. I want to be very clear about that. But I want to talk about what the story of The Little Mermaid is really about. Because, yes, we'll get to the racism. It's there. I get it. I totally get it. I'm a Jew. I've dealt with anti-Semitism. I get it. There's no denial. We have systemic racism in this country, 200%. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm neglecting that by starting with what I'm starting with. But the big argument, if you take it at face value, is it's not true to the source. So the source meaning the original story. Well, neither was the first animated Disney film with the red-headed white mermaid. People are confused by that statement, I bet. But if you look at the original story, she is described as having translucent skin, meaning see-through, like a fish. That was the point of the description, I'm sure, was she was fish-like, not white. Translucent does not mean white. Look it up in the dictionary. That's number one. But the bigger thing is, what was the story about? Because everybody's in an uproar, not everybody, but, a group of people, and again, racism, up in arms about the changing of the Little Mermaid. But the Little Mermaid story doesn't have a happy ending. She dies at the end. Let's just look at that again. She doesn't get the prince. She dies. She becomes sea foam. And actually, the character doesn't have a soul through the whole story because she's a fish. And that was the view of society at the time. And I'll get back to why he points that out in a minute. But she doesn't have a soul. So when she chooses to die, as opposed to killing the prince, because she has that option as well, she becomes sea foam and she has a soul and she floats through purgatory, basically. Okay. So why did Hans Christian Andersen write this story that way? Because he was a gay man who couldn't love another man. In the time that he lived in, that was not acceptable. And he's quoted as saying he's decided to have no sexual relations. I don't know if that's true. I'm not an expert at Hans Christian Andersen, but apparently that is what he stated. He was definitely homosexual. And the story is him turning himself into a woman to tell the tale of how he can't love the person he wants to love, and he's treated like he doesn't have a soul. And the only way for him to have a soul would be to kill himself. That's what that tale is saying. It's a very dark tale, and honestly, if you look at the original, The Little Mermaid should be played by a transgender woman. Just think about that. So all you people out there saying it's not true to the story, great. I'm glad you're LGBTQ supportive. 200%. Should be true. I think what's more upsetting in here, again, besides the racism, which we'll get back to, is that it's okay to change the artist's moral and story or trial or tragedy that the artist is trying to say in their tale. It's okay to change that, make it a happy ending, and the girl gets the prince, and now she can be happily ever after, which, has its own issues. Put that aside. But it's not okay to change the color of her skin when she didn't even really have a color of her skin, because she's translucent and transgender. Now, let's talk about the racism. This country is systemically racist. It's been built into society over generations, hundreds of years, and it's something that's not easy to break. And the way I see it, and I am not an expert on unconscious bias or racism or anything like that. I don't claim to be, just my opinion here, but I think it's a pretty strong opinion. There are two types of racists in this country. Okay, there's people who, metaphorically speaking, or maybe not, maybe actually, wear the little white hoods, right? And there's nothing we can do about them. I'm sorry, but sometimes you have to accept that there are people you can't change. Maybe in hundreds of years it will happen, but right now, no. Okay? But then there are some people who don't even realize that they're racist. They're not overtly racist. We all have unconscious bias. Okay? White people, black people, purple people, green people, we all have unconscious bias. They're built into us. That's why it's called unconscious, because you don't realize it. And I think it all comes down to fear. So there is fear among white people that they're going to be replaced. That's what this is about. You're replacing me. You're replacing that image of me. And I think we all just need to face our fears here. Okay, like Gonzo. I mean, I talk about this movie all the time, but it's so spot on. It's the Muppets Haunted Mansion. Yes, it's made for kids, but I actually think many adults need to watch it. Why? Because once he faces his fears, he's freer and he's more open because he's not hiding and he's not denying that he has them. It's like those people who can't ever say they're sorry. They can't admit they made a mistake because then they're flawed. Well, humans are flawed. No one's perfect. We'd be robots and boring and doing math equations all day. Not that there's anything wrong with math, because math rocks. But I'm just saying that's not the life you want to live. So people need to accept their fears. And I think if you're talking to somebody who's like, well, I just don't think that that's right, ask them why. And when they say it's not true to the source material, tell them what I just told you. And then say, what really bothers you? I really want to know. I really want to help you through this. And I think as they dig down, they'll realize they're feeling like they're being replaced. They might feel like it's wrong to be white, like there is a little bit of that. Guilt is built in. But if they just talked about it and opened up, they'd realize there's room for everyone. And no one is blaming like a 25-year-old white person for something that happened hundreds of years ago. At least I hope not. That's not fair. But we need to recognize that it's built into society and we need to stop continuing it. So we all need to face any fears we have, any uncomfortability we have. You know, oh, well, she's not white. What does that mean? Well, there's a black Annie film and a white Annie film. They both exist. There's room for both. They're both online. And I got to tell you, the white Annie film is pretty bad. But I'll put that aside. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking with that. It's just absolutely terrible film. Poor Eileen Quinn. But they do both exist, and they both have their own audiences. Hopefully, those audiences cross over and watch both. Like, I like to watch figure skating films. There's never enough of them. I run out all the time. And I'm always looking for them, and I've watched them all, or all the ones I have access to anyway. And so there's always room for more. And I'd like to see more people of color in those films, actually.